thank you all for joining. We appreciate you taking the time on a Friday morning if you're on the West Coast or early afternoon in the East Coast. This is an extremely exciting webinar and opportunity to speak with the City of Boston team. I know my name is Michael Mazur from Colu. I'm the Vice President of Business Development for the company. I'm sure some of you that I see, we've spoken before. We've been getting a lot of questions really from cities about the American Rescue Plan Act, about CARES Act, about how cities can really be utilizing these funds to create an economic impact, to kind of think a little bit outside the box. And from our perspective, it's obviously always helpful for us to talk, but I think sometimes there's so much value and things you can learn from really speaking to amazing city officials who kind of lead these programs. And there's really an opportunity, I think, to learn, to get inspired, and hopefully to be able to take action, especially as it pertains to fueling what we call a small business rebound and getting people back into shopping local. So again, I think we're at a very interesting time and we're constantly hearing about new initiatives going on. So we hope that this can help. So I'm actually based in New York, and I have Daniel from my team who will introduce himself. And Natalia, if you want to maybe just quickly introduce yourself as we start.
Sure. Thanks, Michael. Thank you, Daniel. So my name is Natalia. I'm the Director of Small Business in the Office of Economic Development here in the city of Boston. Super excited to be here to talk about our app, which is Be Local, that we were able to launch in partnership with Colu. So excited to answer your questions and kind of get all of those, inquiries and questions and kind of bureaucratic stuff, in a place where we could help you make the best decision for your city.
Thanks, Natalia. And Daniel, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. As Michael introduced, I'm Daniel Leibovitz. I'm a senior city launcher at Colu. Like Michael, we're both based in New York, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to answer as many questions as I can possibly help with, along with Michael and Natalia here.
Awesome. Thanks, Daniel. So yeah, let's just get going. The way this webinar will work is we'll start with these quick intros like we just did. I'll just briefly kind of walk y'all through the program and what we're doing now. And then we'll have some questions. So we kind of curated a list of questions and discussion points to go over. And we will definitely leave time at the end for FAQs and for questions from the audience, which I'm sure you all will have. So just maybe to get started, Natalia, being a very innovative city, can you maybe talk a little bit about some of the things that the city of Boston did during the pandemic to help support the local businesses and residents, more from like an innovation perspective?
Thank you. So that's a great question. I will say that, as we all know, cities don't often become as innovative as we probably would like. Oh, great. Laura Cole just joined. She is with the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics. So our R&D team here at the City of Boston, she's been working with us very closely on this project. So I'm super glad she just was able to join. So I'll start from my office side. So maybe not as innovative or, technologically innovative as we probably would like for this answer, but our team very quickly became a grant issuing organization. So when COVID happened and the city shut down, we did a lot of low tech outreach to businesses, to residents, to try to figure out how we could support. And those were like simple things like Google Forms. We put together a Google application for our the several relief funds that we put out. all in the effort of, getting businesses the information as quickly as we could. So, not super high tech and not super innovative, but for us, it was definitely innovative. I think in addition to that, as we've geared up our outdoor dining program, using other platforms as well to capture that information and connecting with businesses. But as far as my team goes, this project, Colu and Be Local, has been the most innovative thing that we've done in our team, during the pandemic. I'll turn it over to Laura. I'm not sure if she's on yet, but there they are. Hi, Nigel. Nigel and
I'm doing double duty today. I've got a sick baby, so he's sleeping here. But hello, everyone.
I don't have a good excuse to say that. I'm just not fast.
So we're just the question was, and Nigel Jacob just joined. He is the co-founder. Is that right, Nigel? I don't want to get your title wrong, but the co-founder of the Mayor's Office of New Urban Mechanics, and really was my initial sounding board on bringing Colu on. Nigel had heard about Colu through their work with Akron, and reached out to me and was like, could this be helpful? Is this something that could be useful? And was really the leading force behind that. So I'm really thankful to Nigel for that. But the question was whether or not, or what were other types of innovative efforts that the city has put together during the pandemic to support both residents and businesses?
I think in a lot of ways, some of the more innovative stuff was more directly financial, right? I mean, when I look at the various funding mechanisms, we stood those up really fast, and we were getting money, which is what was needed first, right? And getting support for people to be able to pay bills and pay rent and so on. So I think that was a huge advantage in our city, and I think stabilized our business community. And we also did the same thing in sort of rental relief. So I think that on balance, I think those are the two best things we did, and may not, kind of depending on how you define things, is innovative. But we had never done anything like that and gotten the dollars out so quickly. So I think that was my two examples.
That's exactly what I said. So I'm glad you posted
Nice.
that.
I read the memo.
I bet you our work has been innovative for the city, but not necessarily if you look at certain other projects that Nigel has led, not during the pandemic, that have been incredible.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, hi, Nigel and Laura.
Hey.
Very glad to have you here also. And so I think, it's very interesting to see how different cities reacted during the pandemic, and obviously compared to what they had done prior. And of course, Boston is notoriously known for being an innovative city. So it's obviously very interesting to hear in that. What are some things or some approaches that you initially took with CARES Act funds that maybe now you're thinking a little bit differently with the upcoming American Rescue Plan Act funds?
Yeah, I mean, I think most importantly is that the American Rescue Act funds are, yes, they're for relief and for COVID impacted businesses, but they're really focused on recovery, right? So these funds are supposed to be used over the next 5 years. So they're less reactionary than the previous CARES Act funding was, at least for us. So we're thinking about it differently. We're thinking about it, how does this money impact us long term, and really thinking about the shifts there. Like I said, most of our CARES Act funding was immediate, reactionary. Here's what people need today. How do we get that out to them today? And it also included things that we maybe wouldn't necessarily think about for the future, right? So we still have a fund that's open called the Reopen Boston Fund, which is really focused on getting people PPE and businesses to be able to reopen safely. In a year or two, most businesses will have reopened and will have had those safety measures in place. So we won't even need to think about a Reopen Boston Fund in those same kind of parameters. It will be more about business development, business growth, city procurement processes, city processes in general. How do we, ensure that we're eliminating the barriers to doing business with the city or just doing business in the city? So, and I think there'll be a lot more, reflection around our own systems and processes, which will allow us to use those funds more equitably and more focused, I think, in that kind of next 5 years of economic recovery.
Great, thanks, Natalia. So I think we can kind of shift the conversation a little bit about, the Be Local app and also in general towards helping support local businesses. The Be Local app definitely, just as an overview, it rewards, for those who don't know, it rewards residents and visitors in Boston for shopping at local businesses. The whole point is to kind of shift behavior to get people to shop constantly locally. And it's been really very interesting. The app is called Be Local. Each point is called a Boston point. So anytime you shop at a local business, you can get 20% back if it's a participating business. So when someone shops there, they'll get, spend $10, they'll get 2 Boston points, and then they can only redeem those Boston points at local businesses in Boston. And then if it's a women-owned business or minority-owned business or immigrant-owned business or businesses in specific neighborhoods, you can get an additional 10% back. So ultimately, there are some businesses that people get, up to 50% back for shopping there. And that's been amazing so far. So maybe Natalia and Nigel and Laura, of course, what are your thoughts so far? I know we launched it only a few weeks ago, but how's the reception been?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I mean, I think the people who have downloaded it and started using it love it. There's been really warm reception at the city. Our mayor has been really excited about using it and talking about it across the city. I think, there's a little bit of apprehension around another reward program, but we've done, I think, a pretty good job about telling people about what the difference is between this reward program and typical reward programs. And we've gotten some really great press coverage. So we're only 2 weeks into the public launch. So I don't think it's really fair for us to say too much about it. But from where I'm sitting, I'm really happy with the public reception of the program.
On my end, I think we've gotten, lots of questions, lots of people checking in to see what this was all about and so on. And again, this tracks really closely to how we've seen other civic technologies sort of roll out. Obviously, the first, few months are always about building users and so on, so that we're in that trajectory. So it's been it's good to see that people are interested, they're downloading it, and they're getting up to speed.
I can kind of jump in. It's been really awesome as a project manager to work with small businesses as well. Just from a personal standpoint, learning about all the entrepreneurship that exists here and really being able to hear people's stories. I come to the work as having been a community organizer, so it's kind of been very fun for me, but also knowing that this is a tool in businesses toolkit. Businesses are really excited about this, and I've already heard anecdotally of people trying new businesses that they wouldn't have otherwise, like having this sort of small business directory, which is also attached to a rewards program, has been really, really awesome.
Great.
Yeah, I think people can't believe that the city is doing this, which is kind of cool, right? That we're also seen as cool, entrepreneurs on our end, because we've been able to kind of go outside of the typical process with this app.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see also in my mind the reaction from being in Boston a few times now, and how people are reacting on businesses and just the innovation and coming from the city. I think it's always very helpful, and people are surprised, but pleasantly surprised to say the least. Another question we've been receiving a lot is who came up with the branding and design? How was that process? How did it look like?
Well, I'm going to turn that back over to you guys.
I'm gonna say all you.
So we've worked really closely with the Colu marketing team, and they were really the brains behind both concepts around naming, which I think was really helpful because our digital and branding team has been swamped, right? Like we've been trying to get, public health information out and really focused on communicating the existing resources to community members. And so Be Local really came out of Colu's marketing team, and it was a really easy sell. We had a couple of options. We had a couple of names we really liked. And this was our favorite. And, frankly, I think the fact that they come with the marketing team made that process a little bit easier to navigate on our end. I think it just would have taken much, much longer if we would have had to do it on our own. But so I think you guys should really speak to that process on, from Colu's side.
Yeah, so I mean, it's always interesting going through these processes with different cities. And I can say that specifically with Boston, it was great to see that the city had a lot of brand guidelines in place and was very intentional about the kind of things that the city wanted to see, meaning we had a lot of support. I mean, even though Natalia says no, like we really did get a lot of support from the city in the sense of what kind of things you wanted, what kind of, branding guidelines to buy to. And I think we're fortunate to have a wonderful branding team that really came up with some great ideas and we're quick to iterate. But I think it was kind of like love at first sight when we got the name Be Local, and the branding was consistent and extended with the city's branding, and I think really reflects a lot of it. Boston Points also was a name coined by the city. I mean, different cities want different things. I think sometimes a generic name like Points is very simple and easy to conceptualize. So I think, again, with time being of the essence and the real factor being supporting the businesses, that was probably the best way to just kind of move forward with it. And I think it's been going well. People like the name Boston Points, and I always use puns, what's the point of a Boston, So that's one other point. One other question that came up was how much did the city invest in the form of a reward budget for this initial program?
Great question. So we got from a CARES Act funding, from the original CARES Act that actually came out in December 31st, I think it was approved. So it was executed in January. We got $500,000 of that. We were given the opportunity to budget $455,000 directly towards rewards. So putting that money directly into the pockets of business owners. And then the development budget was the leftover, so $45,000.
Okay, perfect. I think one thing we see a lot is the question of equity. And how do we create programs that focus on minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and things of that sort? So can you maybe speak a little bit to your thought process in regards to equity with small businesses? Yeah.
I know equity is a really hip word right now, and everybody wants to have equity embedded in all their processes. For us in Boston, this is something I've been thinking about since I've been in this role, and I know that the previous mayor Walsh was really thinking about that, and current mayor Janie have been really focused on this from lots of different angles. I think for us, we know who our business owners are. We know, especially our neighborhood business owners, they tend to be immigrants. They tend to be women. They tend to be Black and brown people. and they tend to be veteran, like they tend to be who our residents are, right? Residents, Bostonians are the people who make up our small businesses, especially in our commercial districts. And that's who we wanted reflected in this app. So I think equity for us was really simple in that space. We wanted the businesses in our neighborhoods to be represented and be local. So much so that like I pushed a lot to say we can't launch until we have representatives from across the city, from across these really targeted areas. So for me, that was simple. It's just embedded in who we are. It's embedded in everything that we focus on in the city. And if our numbers don't reflect that, at the end of the day, we go back to the drawing board and we figure it out, because we won't put something out that doesn't reflect our city and our residents and our people. It just won't happen. And I think that that's just a founding principle for how I lead and what I do. But it's really easy to have that when, your mayors, also believe that and also allow you to work in that, with that mentality. I don't think we have to make anything up or yes, we have to be very, strategic and thoughtful and focused on it and make sure that is how we're carrying out our values, that we're living by those values. But for us, it's embedded in what we do, at least in my shop. So.
Thanks, Natalia. Anyone else want to compliment the great answer?
I mean, I would probably end up just saying things that Natalia has already said. I mean, it would have been, we do think very broadly about equity in Boston. Boston has a very troubled racial history. And if we weren't already working on issues of equity, we would have not been doing our jobs. And so, doing our best to always be connecting with all sorts of, Black and Brown run organizations in all the different capacities in which we do outreach to the community is important. And certainly as we think of technology, I mean, technology is tricky, right? I mean, there's always going to be like digital equity now more than ever, but certainly it is a huge issue now that the world is mediated primarily digitally, right? We can't, go and see each other. And so ensuring that people have the ability to get online, to be able to access any of these sort of next generation services is important. And, that's something we've been working on, which doesn't say that we're done or that, we've wrapped this up. It's something that we think about, we've been thinking about for years. And so I think that we're able to do these kinds of projects because we've done all of that investment over the years, thinking about, Wi-Fi in schools, Wi-Fi in libraries, and so on, and working with our big commercial providers to make sure that they're rolling out, accessibility, network access as widely as possible. I think it enables us to do this sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, I think there was a lot of intentionality on the actual app around equity for us and racial equity in particular, gender equity, local business equity, right? We wanted to make sure that on the app you could see that we were focused on certain communities and certain business owners. But I think that part was really on us during the development phase, making sure that the images that are being shown are, inclusive, making sure that the language that we're using is inclusive, how we write, how we help businesses write their profiles and the language options there, I think is really critical, and it has to come from each city knowing who their audience is, right? And how that how all of those pieces play a part in that.
Thanks, Natalia. I do see one question that just came up in this regard, so I guess it's good to, it's from an anonymous attendee, so I don't know from who, but how did you reach out to small immigrant businesses and convince them to sign up for the service? Was there resistance or concerns from the merchant community?
Yeah, so we have, back in March, when we were shutting down the city, we actually worked really closely with our city clerk to get us contact information for all of the listed businesses that we could come up with. So Boston has about 40,000 small businesses. This is from a report that we put out in 2016 in Boston. And, one of the elements of being a small business in Boston is you have to, certify your business through the city clerk's office. We were able to get, by taking out all the larger employers, businesses that had bigger parameters, we were able to get a list of 16,000 small businesses that we've been working to build since the beginning of the pandemic. So every single week we host a small business conference call where we invite all of them to participate, to one, for us to share resources, but two, for them to ask us questions, just especially during this really tough time and ever-changing environment that we're in. So that was the primary way. I mean, I think for us, continuing to engage with businesses on a weekly basis, we haven't stopped. We haven't missed a beat since March. So that has been really critical for our communication. Translating documents. So everything that we've done has been translated into the 10 most prominent languages in Boston. So 11 languages total, including English, obviously. We have interpreters wherever we can to engage business owners. We have sent out communications through our immigrant advancement team. We've connected with immigrant, media outlets, and really trying to be as intentional about our outreach as possible. We also, so on my team, I have neighborhood business managers. So every neighborhood has a business manager that's assigned to that role or assigned to that neighborhood. And so they tend to be the liaison, but there are a lot of like community-based organizations and folks on the ground who do have connections to those folks, especially if there's a language barrier. So it takes a lot of work. But I think we've been building it over the course of the last year of really just being a resource and an outlet to those businesses. Not to say by any means that we have done everything, and I don't think it's ever going to be possible for us to get through everything. But again, it's really about intentionality. You know where your immigrants are in your neighborhoods. You know where your businesses are. You know who you have access to, and you know who you don't. And the folks, unfortunately, still, I think, as I look through our Be Local list, are the more engaged businesses. But we've seen some businesses that were never connected to our office before that are now super engaged. And I think part of that has been through the building of trust and community over the last year, of really making sure that our information is as accessible as it can be. Now, the app is not in multiple languages, which is like something that like makes me cringe. But at the same time, I recognize that duplicating this app in every language is nearly impossible. We don't have the budget for that. However, when business owners are putting together their profiles and their behind the counters stories, they, if they need language access, we will get that for them so that we can actually, represent what they're trying to say to the English speaking audience of the app. So the other thing we've been trying to make sure that people understand is they don't actually need to be on the app or read anything on the app to participate, right? Just help them get to the linking of their card, and then those points come in on their own, right? So there's a lot of things where we, by explaining this in English and obviously in translation formats, we're able to communicate the essentials of the app in ways that I think hopefully continue to engage more and more immigrant-owned businesses.
Thanks, Natalia.
Lots of questions in the Q&A and chat, so I don't know if you want to start getting through those, Michael.
Yeah, definitely. Just in essence of time, for sure. And if any of you also from the audience have questions and you want to maybe introduce yourselves and just quickly ask verbally, feel free to raise your hand and I will give you permission to talk. But in the meantime, let's start. So I see there's a question from Brianka Hill, two actually, but let's start with the first. Touching back on funding, what is the plan to fund this program long term? Will users be paying a fee? Will the city continue to fund the program / app in full?
I am convinced that Michael planted you, Priyanka, because we've been having this conversation a lot. No, I'm just kidding. So we launched this very intentionally as a pilot. There is one, obviously, limitations on funding because this is CARES Act. We are exploring kind of what the future of this might look like. We don't have anything to announce or can even really speak to because procurement law, obviously, for us is limits us just kind of making this forever an ongoing project. I think, though, based on the success of this program, we will have a point in time before the pilot ends where we will evaluate the program and try to figure out next steps. We are using some goals and metrics that we set very early on in the process to measure our own success. Obviously, Colu also has an incredible dashboard that they've built out for us so that we have real-time data on the users and kind of how that money is being distributed. And all of that data will help drive kind of our next steps. I want to say that I think when we had originally talked about getting this project off the ground, there was a lot of excitement around the potential of this app, even moving beyond small business development, really thinking about how we leverage something like this, a community-based rewards app for other things, whether it's, community engagement or, attending a meeting or, we have 311, which is our kind of, the place you call when anything's broken in the city, right? You call 311 or you document it on the app. And that's very kind of a data collecting piece for the city, but there's no kind of turnaround push out app that lives with the city yet. And so thinking about what are the other benefits of Colu and Be Local, I think is on our minds. But most immediately, I think we are still, it's too early for us to tell. It was very targeted pilot for 3 months once we went public in order to be able to measure the impact it had on not just small businesses, but on the city and kind of the community overall. So we're not there yet. And I think that is, one of the challenges is like, we don't know if this will live beyond this 3-month pilot or if the data is so overwhelming that we can figure out how to make it part of our budget and find some operating dollars to keep it going moving forward. And Nigel, I mean, you have worked with so many projects, some of which are still alive today and some of which have not, survived. And so maybe, I don't know if you can talk a little bit about the balance, right? And at what point you guys are making decisions to make something real.
It's a good point. I think that, in fact, this is an important inflection point, how you think about evaluations. I think one of the problems that we face in government is that if something works once, we keep it around forever, right? And I mean, sometimes that's a good thing, but sometimes it's not, especially if it isn't delivering. And so we think a lot about evaluation in neuromechanics, and we try, our way of thinking and working is to be driven by experiments and prototypes, so that we always, before we get deeply into any project or attempt to scale it citywide or whatever the right scaling ratio that is there, we do try to run it as an experiment to see what works and what doesn't. And if it doesn't work, we try to understand why it's not delivering, and maybe there's a way to fix it. But I would encourage all of you to think about it in these terms. I'd love you, Natalia, to talk a little bit about how we are thinking about evaluation of the pilot. But I think that it is useful to develop a set of metrics for the near and medium term about what you'd expect out of an app like this. Would you mind talking a bit about that, Natalia?
Of course, and Laura can also speak to this as well. But I think very early we said, what are some of the things that we would measure as success here, right? And one, very simple, very easy to do is like, did we get all of the money out to the businesses? Like, did they find that relief and that, the fact that their participation is worthwhile? So there will be, a survey that we will put out both to users and to the businesses about their participation in this. And I think just like really looking at the economic impact, right? So I know Colu has been measuring this with Akron, and they found a 9 times multiplier of economic impact on every point, or I think they call them coins, on every coin that they give out, what that economic impact look like. And so I think we will definitely use some real-time data, but I think for me, as it continues, or whether it continues as a small business resource, one, I think we have to be able to measure that that economic impact, but two, the sentiment, right? How do businesses feel about the app, and whether or not they found it useful? Because even if the perception on our end is that, look at all this money that we brought into the neighborhoods, if businesses don't feel like they got paid fast enough by the city, that overall, like the total amount of money they got back from the rewards was worth it, right? Like there's a lot of those layers, and some businesses might get a $5 check in 2 weeks, right? Because only one person used their rewards, and maybe they're not seeing the back end of like how many people actually earned rewards at that business and then use those rewards elsewhere, or use so I think for us, that metric those metrics will be measured at the midpoint and at the end from business owners in a couple of different ways for us to try to get some of that sentiment. But then we'll use those factors, like how much of the budget we actually used, how many users used it, where are the users spending that money, who are the users, and things like that, to be able to qualify it. But Laura, I don't know if you want to add anything there.
I mean, at the end of the day, what quantifies a financial recovery is revenue, So how is this app driving more revenue to businesses? Is it increasing, like diversifying their customer base? Is I think the whole point that Colu's trying to get at is like this emotional connection, right? How are we measuring that? How are we measuring that, consumers have actually shifted their spending habits from, bigger retailers to smaller ones. And I think that's just, looking at app data, like what's the engagement rate? What's the retention rate? And preliminarily, it's been pretty good. So we hope to see that continue.
Thank you. So we have time maybe for just a few more questions, maybe 2 more or so.
Michael, there were some in the chat that I know that they weren't in the Q&A.
Okay.
I want to make sure we don't lose those.
So I see from Phil Smith, what were objections or concerns of the local businesses? Do they take the discount of the reward points?
So I haven't seen a lot of objections or concerns, and there have been some about Plaid, which is the credit card company that is linked to that actually collects the credit card information, just about like understanding more of that, and people not really getting it, or even that company having some limitations. I think the biggest concern that we have seen so far is that the actual points are not automatic, they're not instantaneous. So as soon as you shop, it can take up to 14 days for people to see those points. So business owners are trying to communicate that with their customers, which just doesn't necessarily always communicate well. So that has been a concern for businesses. I think some business owners just felt really, or still feel really overwhelmed with what they're having to manage, that they can't even remotely think about adding another thing to their plate. So they, even if it's a really simple application process and really simple to onboard, it still requires time. And a lot of business owners haven't participated and they've said, oh, I just haven't had time. So I just remind them that it's a pilot, that we want to see them participate as soon as possible so that they can maximize their participation. So those have been some of the concerns. I haven't really seen anybody saying, no, I'm not willing to do that, or I'm not willing to participate. Everything we've heard is really around time constraints and things like that. Laura, do you want to add anything there? I know you've been working much closer with the businesses.
I mean, kind of what you said, like it's, you know, businesses are, like all of us are just wary of like one more app. You know, anytime there's a system, people are worried about who's going to game that system, right? So, you know, we're talking to business about the security behind the app and behind this, you know, the whole program. But then also like the time constraint of just like, well, I don't have time to be explaining this to customers, but, you know, Colu has been really great with our marketing material that, you know, we have counter signage that residents can, you know, just scan a QR code and be directed to an FAQ. So anything like things like that I think are pretty easy to mitigate. To Natalia's point, you know, most businesses have been pretty receptive once they understand the program.
Perfect. So I see we have another question from Bianca Hill. Bianca, I guess I can allow you to talk because I guess you are raising your hand, so feel free to talk. Go ahead. Maybe introduce yourself also.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Great. Hi, my name is Bianca Hill. I'm a business engagement specialist for the city of Syracuse under the Neighborhood and Business Development Department. Yes, you were correct. I was sent here by Michael and Jen Tiff. Essentially, thank you again for answering that first question. The second question was focused more around the engagement strategies. I know you've talked about some that you've done with the businesses, but essentially what's been most successful so far with you guys with pushing this program out to the community and getting them to get on board?
Yeah, that is a great question. Bianca, thank you for asking and thanks for being here, even though you were very clearly planted. No, just kidding. So first and foremost, we had a 2-week soft launch where we actually invited our city employees and basically our Boston Main Street's directors and stakeholders to participate. So we said to them, we need your eyes because one, you understand how city works, and two, you live everywhere in the city and you're spending dollars and you should be a part of this. So I think part of our initial engagement was really focused on word of mouth and getting our kind of the folks closest to us to test it and to try it out and to tell us what they thought about it. I think as far as community engagement goes, I mean, to be totally honest, it launched at like a really unique time in Boston where we have a new mayor who happens to be the first woman and also happens to be the first Black person and also happens to be the first Black woman to serve as mayor in the city of Boston. So this historic moment was like in a place in time where people are listening to what she has to say, right? And so she actually loves Be Local and was so excited to be able to announce it during one of her press conferences and to really speak about it in a way that I think you dream of, right? You want your city leadership to be all on board on this and helping you amplify that message. So that got us a lot of traction, a lot of press. I think it's still really early. So in our first week, we did see really incredible numbers. We assigned some reward points for the first 3,000 people to sign up. So that has also helped us get, I think, more people on the platform. I think there's some marketing strategies which I'll actually use this moment to talk about. Joy Miller's question, which was how did you promote Be Local and what's the size of that budget? So it's a very small but mighty budget of $10,000 that was embedded into the development costs of Be Local. So we use that budget to buy bus shelter ads. We leveraged all of the city's digital ad spaces across the city to really be able to add it into the mix. We're putting together a video that will be out and it'll go on social media. It'll go on the city's page and it will also, and so obviously with that also social media marketing budget, we're also doing a lot of pitching to local newspapers. And making sure that our business owners are visible on there, right? So there was a great piece on CBS Channel 5 that Daniel and Michael showed us this morning of one of our favorite, local favorites, talking about the app. It wasn't coming from a city official, which is like dynamite, right? So the more that you can promote the people using it and the people that are bought in, I think that really helps. And then, so we're just getting started. There's a lot more work to do. It's not a lot of money. We're printing, so hopefully very soon, printing some stickers that will go on the actual sidewalks in front of the businesses. So it'll catch people's eyes. There's been smaller stickers put on windows and, just visibility in people's local favorites, right? Getting business owners to be the liaison and the kind of advocate, them working to get their customers on the app is really critical for us, and I think has been really beneficial because we gave them a social media toolkit, and I help manage the Be Local Instagram account, and frankly, we're seeing a lot of people promote it on their own personal social media, which is really, really cool. So it's really grassroots. It's really low budget, but I think we do what we can, and we're going to be trying to figure out how to amplify it moving forward as well.
Great.
Thank you.
So I don't know if we have time for maybe one more question. So I see one more just from Marcia Murray. Who were the different stakeholders you engaged before rolling out this program, and how did their input inform this?
Yeah, great question, Marcia. So we did engage with our Boston Main Street's program directors, and we asked them to bring some business owners into kind of just a few focus groups so that we could see what their perception was. But I want to say we didn't do that until we had full-blown internal buy-in. Let me be really clear. I think any new thing that you create with the city isn't just creating it for that moment. It's really thinking about how are you making it real? How are you keeping it going? All the different stakeholders that have to play a role and be involved in, from the digital team to the marketing team to the mayor's office to the budget team to legal, and having our legal team sign off on all these things. So I think there was a lot of internal work, a lot of meetings, a lot of conversations that had to happen before we took it to some external stakeholders. And then we also engaged with the city of Akron. They were really gracious to have several conversations with different members of our team to get what they needed in order to move it forward. And then I think my saving grace was having the mayor's office of new urban mechanics and having Laura and Nigel bought into this and helping us steer that ship. So there's a lot of internal work that I think was more critical to the success of this than, people who, were, I think, receptive, and they, because the city hadn't done something like this before, it was a little abstract. So they were like, yeah, we'll try to do what we can, and of course we'll sign up if it's easy enough, and of course we'll do it if it's simple. So I think the hardest part for us, and going to another question that I saw in the chat, was just from Guy about what objections did we face when bringing this concept to leadership. It was really about all right, what happens after the pilot? All right, what is the way in which you're going to move this forward? Who do you need buy-in from? how are you going to market this? Are we building another thing that's just going to kind of live in the abyss? So those were all the questions that we had to find answers for that we didn't have preemptively. It took a lot of conversations to figure out those answers and to have kind of a strategy to move the project forward. But I'm going to let Nigel and Laura speak. I actually have to run. So I want to say thank you for having me. Happy to answer questions if we need to do a follow-up of these. I think that would be fine. And I just want to make sure that you all know you can contact us directly at any point in time if you have more questions. But this is a great time for me to put Nigel and Laura on the spotlight because they are really kind of that, they've played that leadership role in a invaluable way. So thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. See you soon.
See you, Natalia.
Thanks, Natalia. So I see maybe there's a few more questions left, but if you do have any other questions or I know in the 8 minutes left, feel free to also raise your hand and we're happy to give you permission to speak as well. So let me just scroll up and see if there's any additional questions. So she mentioned that. So I guess unless anyone has other questions, maybe Laura or Nigel, any just like final words to, I know to the individuals who are on this call, this webinar, I know there's people from different cities, both from, all the way in the West Coast to the East Coast to the Midwest. So just any last final thoughts?
One final comment I think that I'll make is if you're considering doing a project with Colu or frankly with any startup, it's useful to go into it with a capacity to be able to collaborate closely, right? So I think these projects work well. I think that if you simply treat Colu in this case as a vendor, which is obviously required by law, but it also will make the project harder. If you keep them at like an arm's length and just sort of speak through the lawyers, you know what I mean? And so I think that as much as you can, you want to make them partners in the effort. I mean, Colu has a lot of really capable, smart people who have done this in different places before. And so I think you want to, on your side, on the city side, you certainly want somebody that is empowered to be able to hustle and do whatever it takes to make those connections. In our case, that was Laura, who was supporting Natalia directly and is definitely hustles all the time to get these things done. But I think you have to approach approach the work as a genuine partnership and collaboration. Do you want to comment on that, Laura?
When I'm not tending to a sick baby, I'm hustling. I can't say anything better than Nigel and Natalia have already said it. But yeah, it's been a really cool project so far, and we're really looking forward to the summer and seeing it really blossom. So, yeah, we're here if you want to talk further.
And I can add like one more note just from visiting businesses in Boston multiple days in the past couple of weeks. It's been so exciting to see their reaction when we come over, when we come with the collateral, when we talk to them and explaining the, an overview of the app, just like answering small questions that are left that they have, and like see them how like they see the potential of what that can bring them, and like they understand that it's a win-win-win situation, right? Because they understand that it comes at no cost to them as a business. They understand that it comes at no cost to their customers, to users, and it's come from city funds. And when that clicks in, it's really like incredible to see like the smile, literally ear to ear smile on their face. And it's just like, it warms your heart seeing that, and it just makes you want to work harder. Even like we're putting 110% and more every single day, but like when you see that, it gives you like an extra motivation.
Absolutely. And I can say, well, thank you, Nigel and Laura. And I know that we've all been putting in a lot of effort. And I think that, like Daniel was mentioning, I don't feel like it's work. I think we all kind of see this as this mission that we have. And it definitely is empowering and exciting to see the reaction of the local business owners once we're there. I think that's what we're here for. I mean, seeing those reactions really I can't speak to Daniel. Has been on the train back and forth to Boston. I think four round trips. No, 4 rides in the past 4 days. So he's been back and forth from Boston a bunch, and we're all really trying to be hands-on just to again see it in person. Ben, unless there are no further questions, we thank you all for joining, and thank you very, very much to the City of Boston, to Nigel, Laura, and Natalia for speaking and for participating, and definitely to everyone that is on the call. Feel free to reach out directly, as Natalia mentioned, to the Boston team, or we'll figure out some more ways to answer more questions. But again, anything to do to think outside the box and help support businesses as we recover from the pandemic. So thanks again, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Everyone.
Bye.